Good evening. You are listening live to the Extreme Movie Show. I'm your host, Rob, broadcasting to you from the Pine Hills Palace, just west of Orlando, Florida, balmy 75 degrees. Now, we had a cold snap last night. It was only 55 today, getting ready for Thanksgiving. And I'm often reminded of Thanksgiving some 20, 30 years ago that brings me to this movie we're getting ready to talk about tonight called Falling Down with Michael Douglas from 1993. One of the most controversial movies of the early 90s, one that triggered the fledgling network CNN as well as many others because of the portrayal of some ethnic minorities, some situational things, some governmental things, just stuff that really isn't in movies at all today anymore. It's a movie that, despite being viewed as a great social commentary, I don't really think it's great at social commentary at all. I think it's just escapism. It's fantasy. It's nowhere
Mhm.
near as good as on the level of, say, like a Death Wish that actually has a point to say. It's supposed to almost be a comedy despite some dark stuff in there too. So it's kind of like all over the place, but there's some brilliant things to discuss in here. And alongside with me tonight to discuss
Yeah,
Falling Down with Michael
yeah,
Douglas and Robert Duvall is RDV from the Great Midwest.
yeah.
Good evening, sir. How are you?
Doing good. This is a feel-good movie. This is when you just want to vent. You watch this.
How so?
You put yourself in his shoes because I don't want to kill anybody, but man, like there's a lot of stuff you identify with in here. This guy's having a bad day. He's just having one bad day, and then it gets getting worse and worse. And it's just how society can trigger us. No pun intended, but. I can see there's a scene here where he goes. I said it's probably the best scene in this whole entire movie is the burger scene. We'll get to that
At the
in a little bit.
Whammyburger.
At the Whammyburger, but he wants to have his breakfast, and they're like, well, sure, it's a few minutes past. He's like, he says aren't you really the customer's always right? He's like, that's not our policy. It's like it's like, well, it's just like. All of this could have been avoided if they would have just gave him a freaking breakfast sandwich. Most places will bend over backwards if you go to a place,
So I'm
already
gonna,
did.
just because I feel froggy tonight, totally disagree with all this. The thing about this movie is you can play both sides of it, and I don't like that in a way because it leaves, I think, of you're confused because he's not having a bad day, but it's portrayed as he just has a bad day, and so he, to your point, represents what we would like to say or do. Maybe not all of us, but some of us may have thoughts about things that we just don't express because it wouldn't do you any good,
Well,
and it's a
well,
part of
well,
being civilization.
let me elaborate on the bad day because that's how it comes off in the very beginning.
Exactly,
So
and we know
towards the
it's
end,
not.
you find out that he's much more worse off in the mental department.
Exactly.
Um,
Yes.
but like I said, the little things he does, like sometimes we can see as sane, dealing with punks. There's these guys think they're gonna beat him up.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Oh yeah.
he gets revenge on him. It's like so
Well,
it's a fantasy venting movie. He said
yes.
it's corporate America.
And this is the time here in the early 90s, slight recession, changing the guard. Music was changing. A lot of cultural things were not the way they felt or were in the 80s for a decade. People weren't happy anymore like they were in the 80s with the opportunity to be successful here in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
So you started to see that being reflected in pop culture, definitely in movies. So this is a movie about a guy, Michael Douglas, who's got the buzz cut. Michael always has done a great job of playing very strong, authoritative figures, and Michael Douglas is not a physically imposing individual. He's not a little 150-pound soaking wet CGI superhero either, but he just has a way of presenting himself, and he's got a lot of experience. Obviously, he comes from a historic family name. He's a great performer, and in here he plays a guy and we'll just call him defense because he works for the defense industry
For
out in
7
California.
years.
Could be but here's the thing, that if I've had some association with some defense industries, that I obviously don't try to get too personal, but I will say this. When you have this look that he has getting out of his car in traffic, sure, all of us have felt like, oh God, LA traffic sucks, or I-4 here in Orlando traffic sucks, or whatever main artery you're at. If you're in Atlanta, that sucks. Everything sucks. Traffic sucks. It's worse now, right? So he gets out. We're like, okay, we can relate to that. And then he gets on an adventure, and when he's encountering these different scenes, the movie's awesome. So the
Well,
very first look, if you know anything at all about how looks developed in corporations, because you mentioned something earlier about corporatism in here, and that's a big
yeah.
element. He's got a short sleeve white dress shirt on. That is
Nine,
probably the most impotent looking
1960s kind of
power
look, yeah.
outfit you can have. Yeah, it's not long sleeve. He's got the tie. He's got the nerd glasses. And so it's like, of course, he's not going to be taken seriously at his job because he looks like a dork, not in a good way. He's not
Well,
dressed
he
professionally.
looks. Oh, he said he's not in real tail, so like where he's not wearing a a
Okay,
burger
but
hat.
working for the
But
defense industry,
and
he was a draftsman, and those were going out of style then. CAD was getting really popular at that time, and people were transitioning over. So back in the 70s or 80s, if you actually drew prints by hand, and then eventually that got scanned and converted, that would be one thing. You could make a living. But he was really doing at best, mid-level job. And that's it. And at that time, with manufacturing since the 70s going overseas, not being too prevalent here in the United States, he was really in a dead end job,
white
and he's not
collars,
that old.
yeah, white collars never really got respect because the blue collars is where all the work was. White collars, push buttons. That's why people never liked white collars. You were
Yeah,
the
and so
management.
yeah, and he has that attitude, right? I mean, we see that in here. And one thing I want to argue too that I want to just introduce now. We'll talk about it with some of these scenes. We'll go through them a little bit in order here. Is you could argue that he's not a Caucasian American conservative Constitution gun
No,
toting whatever.
no.
You could argue that this guy's a bedwetting liberal to go to the other side too, and it's interesting how that plays out depending on what your political views are with it too. But you had mentioned a scene early on. I want to go right into some of the first scenes because they're the most memorable parts of this movie. The second half, I think, kind of falls down a little bit.
Before we get into that,
Pun intended.
I want to mention the whole thing leaving a car in traffic.
Go ahead.
A normal person would not do that because cars are expensive. You can't just leave a car there and expect it's gonna be there when you get back, especially in Los Angeles.
Oh yeah. Oh
Someone's
yeah.
gonna carjack you. So that was my first clue that something was off with this guy. No,
It's a good point. And again, because of some of the scenes we're going to get ready to talk about here, there's a darkness, not just with him, but with some other characters in here too. But it gets overshadowed by some of the lunacy and absurd things that happen, and it's a bit scatterbrained, and that's why I don't think the movie works, even though it's immensely watchable.
The movie works as a dark comedy.
Yes, it has to be a comedy.
Yeah.
All right, so the basic scene that kind of sets all this up after he walks out is, we see a woman struggling, single mom alert, with their little daughter, and of course it's his ex-wife. And
Elizabeth Hershey.
She's not likable. Of course, he's not likable either. But we don't see much of her.
Well,
we don't know what
she's not likable for the fact that you can't really say that because we don't really know what she's gone through with him.
I will mention that in a later scene.
Yeah.
But right off the bat, it's just, okay, here we go. We're glorifying a broken household in a way. Oh my gosh, it's tragic. So we get that he's not feeling good and he wants to go home. Okay, that's not a good sign.
Yeah.
But it's a hot day. So right after he walks out of traffic, he crosses over and he goes to I believe it's a Korean store.
Yep.
Okay, and the Korean guy doesn't want anything to do with him. And they go through this thing. And you could argue that the owner of the store is absolutely 100% right. I'm not going to give you change for this dollar bill, even though that might be a civil thing to do and something that up until probably the 90s, it was not a big deal and it happened everywhere, right?
Yeah.
So this level of civility and politeness has gone away. And he's like, you buy something. No change. You buy something. And so Michael Douglas gets all pissed. He's like, you no trouble. You leave. And he goes and he grabs Michael Douglas defense grabs the bat from him, and then he beats up the store. And we're like, yeah, screw you for being rude to me. And it's a juvenile way of looking at the world, and who doesn't at some point in their life?
There's a little bit over top for that part.
A little bit.
It said walking, leaving a car there. Then when he does here, you can tell he's immediately you can tell he's emotionally disturbed. Something going on that we haven't seen yet. And we're just kind of like seeing the. He's the kind of guy like most people would not. The thing is that unless you know the signs, you're not going to notice this. So if you didn't see him doing this, just seeing him walking around, you're not going to know. You aren't going to pay attention. But
he's got a tie clip on too, which is completely impotent, a device that just shows how weak you are, as well as the old school haha. So it's so fun. It's not funny, and it hasn't been funny for 30 years or more. Pocket protector with this bunch of pens in there. It's just he's made to look like a weak individual. So it's kind of funny, but not really. It's just like, okay, where's this movie going? You know, he's exploded up. There's a lot of American flags in here too, that this guy's selling the Korean owner. Um, but eventually he, takes the dollar bill because he's low on money. Puts it in the till, takes 50 cents out so he can make his phone call to his ex-wife or
But yeah,
whatever.
this is daughter's
A lot
birthday
of violence.
party. Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting though too, because he mentions, we have some economics people that listen to us and finance people. I know that for a fact. And
hmm
he does mention, well, we're going to roll back to like 1960s prices. How much for this? Too much. Bam. And he does. That's the whole thing with him
Yeah.
destroying everything. And it's amazing because definitely by the 80s and 90s, inflation had run rampant since the early 70s. And
Yep.
it's just obviously something that still occurs today. And we don't have to dive into it. But the fact that
No.
it triggered him as an individual and he was aware of it was really, I thought, kind of interesting. I see a lot of sriracha in the background too. I didn't notice that before, but good on him. And then we're introduced to Robert Duvall, who's a guy who's on his last day before he retires.
Yeah.
He's got the multicultural ethnic group that doesn't pay him any mind at all, including a Latino guy, a dude bro jack off, and
African American, there's Hispanic, and then like I don't think
there's the Asian guy in there too, and they couldn't give two shits about him. And that's realistic. You're an old guy, you're useless, what the hell do you know? And that happens in real politics. But here's the thing about Robert Duvall. I will say this. His performance in this movie is as good as Michael Douglas, because he's able to disarm all these people in a way that, like, we would like to see him erupt like Defense does, and he doesn't. And like, damn it, Robert Duvall, why are you so good? I don't know why you are, but you are. And again, as a character actor in this movie, he's phenomenal in it.
Yeah, it's a slightly older Robert Duvall, used to what I've seen some of those other movies, So this time he's kind of up in age a little bit.
Yep.
So at first I didn't recognize him at first, because I remember from watching True Grit, with John Wayne.
Oh yeah. Well, and the thing too is he's been around, so you're like, oh, this guy, and then he doesn't hog the screen. He doesn't
he's
take it with his energy. Yeah. That's the beauty of Robert Duvall and the way he approaches this, because the next scene is like, counter to this. It's like we're flipping sides of the coin here, because this next scene is the one you wanted to talk about, so I hand it over to you. It's the scene where Michael Douglas he's got a hole in his shoe and he's just taking time off. He's sitting on a graffiti block here in a little piece of grass or whatever, and these two wannabe thugs. I don't know if fellas is the right word I want to use, but these two gangbangers are coming in and wanting to harass him a little bit. Go ahead and take it.
He doesn't. They think they're gonna pull one over on him, and he pretty much outsmarts them. He ends up actually stealing their gun too. After the process, so now he's got a submachine gun. It's I said that the whole entire movie, I'm really enjoying it. Even when I first watched it, I thought I was like, oh my gosh, it's really over the top. And I'm thinking like, well, it's Los Angeles. I'm sure stuff like this has probably happened before, or hasn't happened. And then you had the Korean LA riot stuff down there, which I guess the director had said it had nothing to do with this. It just happened to be a coincidence that it was happening. It was so. It's just these are typical thugs, that they're gonna pull one over. It'd be the same guys, it show up in the Dirty Harry movies. They're gonna like outsmart them, and then they end up being like just becoming idiots, and they're easily overtaken. They don't. Even he said it's a crazy white guy, and then they're out of there.
Well, yeah, and the thing too is like in the early '90s, just to kind of put in perspective, because you're really young at the point. you had, I think it was in '94. You had the earthquakes. You also had the OJ verdict. You also had the, why can't we all just get along bit. So a lot of stuff was going on. Perot basically, ran a very strong third party presidency campaign in '92, I believe it was. So Bill Clinton came in, and a lot of things changed there. A lot of taxes went up, and that was a stark contrast to what was going on in
Yeah.
the '80s, allegedly. And the thing about this whole movie is there's definitely no subtlety. So in here, when he's sitting on this piece of concrete, it's all graffitied up, and the two guys are like, "Hey, what are you doing? This is our turf. You're not supposed to be here." It's like, "Well, I'm sorry, I didn't see any sign or whatever like that." He's not intimidated by these guys. He's like, "God, I can't believe I'm having to deal with such stupid shit." Because they point to it, and there's nothing you can comprehend and read out of here, even if you know Spanish or like that. And he's like, "That's our sign there." And he's like, "Well, what's it saying?" He says, "You don't belong. You have to pay a toll." And he's like, "It says all that?" And it's like, that's kind of funny. It's like, well, maybe if you wrote it in English,
Mhm.
and it's like, this is the kind of stuff that people would pick these scenes apart and go, see how racist this movie is,
Yeah.
see how whatever. And
So it just, like I said, that this feels like a video game. He just requiring, like, as like I said, the two gangbangers think they're gonna pull one over him. He hits him with they pull out a knife. He hits him with his briefcase, and now he's got a knife. And then later on, he gets a gun. It's like he just
we
keeps.
mentioned before that with Tom Cruise, when he's like, yo, homie, you forgot the briefcase. That's a great scene. This is a great scene. These are two
Yeah.
wonderful briefcase scenes. Great scenes in cinema
Yeah.
usually have a briefcase.
And then, like I said, he comes across a panholder, so he gives him his briefcase, which actually contains his lunch. So that's why he goes to the burger place, get a Whammyburger.
Yeah, that's next.
Yeah. But yeah, these guys end up crashing. At the phone booth, they crash. And yeah.
Well, right before the Whammyburger, yeah, you see the gangbangers with their woman and other peeps with them
their new friend. Yeah, because there's two guys now. It's four guys now.
Yeah, so they're gonna roll up on this guy and take him out. And this is what I mean. This movie's dark. He's got his back to the road, and he's on something called a payphone that cell phone users may not know of. I'm joking, of course, but it was definitely still a thing.
Yep.
They pull out the gun. They kick the one girl out for a little bit, so she's not a part of it. And it's just a simple drive-by, and they just totally miss. I'm like, oh my God, this is so stupid. But two people get shot, and they're laying on the ground, and I assume they're dead. I'm like, that's not funny. It's funny, but it's not funny.
Well, the thing is that this is possible. It's a true thing. That's because you have a gun doesn't mean you know how to use it.
Exactly. Especially when you're hanging out the side of a moving vehicle or whatever, and like most gangbangers do, they never hold it properly. They always turn it to the side.
It's hard enough to aim if you're bad aim with a semi-automatic. Now imagine fully automatic, or anything that shoots in spurts,
Yeah, I mean, this is dark to me. I don't.
That's not. Yeah, it is. I said it's a very dark movie. That's not funny. It's where people again dying. But it's keeping it real. I mean, if they would have done that, and if people would have survived, it wouldn't be as realistic. They're truly trying to make this really as real as they can. With a little bit of Hollywood magic, some of it. But like I said, this guy would have been taken out by cops. Someone would have called. He would have been taken out immediately. He wouldn't have gotten so far in the movie, but it's a movie.
Well, in our right now present review on Sunday nights on the Xtreme Movie Show of our Clint Eastwood Dirty Harry sequence, where we're getting ready to do the fifth one, the Deadpool, we're even marked ever since the first film being set, well, in this case, San Francisco, and this one's in LA, that they talk about the system and they talk about societal things going on for a long time. Here, I'm not surprised at all, especially if you watch a lot of movies that have LA as a backdrop. I think of They Live from John Carpenter in '88, which comes to mind. Tons of homeless camps, tons of this and that. This is not a new phenomenon. And in here, he's surrounded by a whole bunch of them or whatever like that. And like you said, he's got their gun and he's got their bag. But right before he gets to the Whammyburger is the scene I want to talk about with his wife, because I think this is very telling and also very dark.
Yeah.
So his ex-wife, she'd gotten a couple calls from him, and so she calls the police, and they come over to check things out and write up a report and all that. And so she's talking to this one cop, and he's not being belligerent. He's like, "Well, so did he threaten you?" She's like, "Well, not exactly. Do you have a restraining order?" "Yes." And so there's some back and forth about it, and he's like, So what did he do? And she goes, well, he has a temper. Well, did he strike you or the child? And she's like, no, but sometimes he just looked like he might. That's like, really? He's that pissed off and that's why you divorced him? I mean, I understand that, and nobody wants to trivialize domestic abuse or violence or whatever, but it seems like such almost a petty way she's doing it. Well, I've got the house now, and you're just not paying me alimony, and no, you can't see your daughter, and because I thought you might hit us one day, even though he never did anything,
he
and
didn't hit
she could not say to the cop what he did at all, even if he displayed violence, like punching a wall or
whether
breaking
he
something.
hit her or not is the fact that, like you said, we're seeing right now, like he acts at the manner like that. Like, some people are just not mentally unhinged. We don't know what else. He screamed or yelled or screaming disorderly conduct. He may have raised his hand. I mean, if he didn't hit her, no, but
Well, the way it's made it out to be
yeah,
is that it's
you're
like,
divorced.
really? Yeah, you had a bad argument. He raised his voice, and you got all triggered. I
It
mean,
could be other things. Maybe he
yeah,
was.
who knows?
Yeah, maybe he was ignoring her. Maybe he was seeking attention. Who knows?
Doesn't feel that way though.
It's not important. The story.
Disagree totally, because that's what drives this whole thing. He's a failure as a man, as a provider in these old classic roles, and that's what makes him go crazy. It's not the traffic and the stress and all the stuff that comes up. Those are just convenient scenes that we all can relate to.
He's divorced. Whether he's divorced or not, they could, if they would have said he physically abused her and stuff, he's then that would have changed the dynamic of that story.
Yeah, but the threat of maybe having a temper, we all get angry. It just seemed very weak to me.
He was constantly angry, probably.
But that
we don't know.
Talking about her relationship with him.
We don't know her.
Right.
Yeah, so it's up to you to fill in the blanks.
Well, yeah, because this he has a real quick scene where a bum's harassing him for food, and the guy's like, well, where's your driver's license? You said you drove down here, and he's going on or whatever, and this bum just will not leave him alone. And nobody likes to be harassed by a bum. I mean, and it's like,
especially nowadays. There's so many people who would rather go out in the middle of the street, make like $400 to $5,000, depending where you are, just by panhandling sometimes.
Absolutely.
And
you know why they all have a puppy with them? Why they're panhandling now, right?
Yeah.
It's because cops don't want to have to deal with what do I do with the puppy.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Plus, it might be like, oh, you might donate because of the cute puppy. Yeah. No, it's like I say, it's such a neurotic movie. It can be really, really dark, and then it can be really, really absurd and kind of funny, because the absurd funny scene to me that's not dark at all is the Whammyburger. And the only thing I want to say is in here is the casting, and the Whammyburger scene here is phenomenal, because the manager is near the top of my list of immediately punchable with extreme prejudice faces I've ever seen in a film, where the girl who's just a ditz behind her calls the manager. It's 2 minutes after the hour. Sheila, that's it. Yeah. So you want to talk about the scene? Take it away.
He goes in there, and and he's mainline. He goes to Sheila, and then he's like, well, he says, I want, a ham and cheese, whatever, sandwich. He's like, well, sorry, we our lunch menu's up now. It said start at 11:30, and he looks at his watch. It's 11:36. It's like, he's like, okay. She's like, well, you have to order something off the menu. Order a burger. He's like, I want a burger. I want my breakfast. So he's like, is the manager? And yes, do you have a manager on here? And she's like, yeah. And she's like, hey, Rick, can you come here? Customer wants to speak to you. He's like, hey, Rick, I was just talking to Sheila. He's like, wait a minute. Why am I calling you by first name? I worked for a guy for 7 years. I didn't call him Mr. and I was last name. I'm talking to you like I'm at an AA meeting, like we're buddies. I don't know you guys. And Rick, I don't want to be your buddy. He says he says at the end, he's like, I don't want to be your buddy, Rick. And he says, like, he's like, Rick, you ever hear that saying, it's about customers. He's like, and Rick's kind of like says, okay, he's got the buck teeth, the little gap in his tooth. He's all like dweeb. He's there for life. He is. He says to the Michael Douglas's character. He says like, wow, that's not our policy. He's like, you want something? It's burger. You want a burger? At lunchtime, you got to order off the menu. He's like. And I like how he sets the bag on there. We know there's guns in there and stuff. No, but they don't know that. And he's like, and like, and I love how like, he says, I forgot what the exact words, what the quote was, but like the way he responds, he's like, oh, and then he pulls out his gun, and he shoots in the air. He's like, it's like, I want my freaking sandwich, and then goes to the whole spiel. And he's like, he's like, you know what? And after a while, he's like, fine, I'll take a burger, and he gives a burger, and they finally give him the burger, the Whammyburger. He's like, what is this? It's like, it's real small. He's like, I love how he goes around with the guy, everybody's on the ground, he's like, freaking out. He's like, you see this up there? You got a guy here? Does that look anything like there? Rick, I think you guys are scamming me. And he's like, why would anybody pay for this crap? And he throws at him, and all the whole scene is just like, wow. The guy's mental, but it's a dark, funny, scene, because we've always wanted to just not hold up, not hold up at a place or restaurant, but we've always, we want to mouth off these people. The people are giving us food because,
Yeah,
it's their.
that's what I want. That's what you're showing me. That's what I'm paid for. Give me that. Don't give me this crap.
You're gonna raise the prices, and now I'm expected to give you money for something that's not even worth it. And like $8. Some of these meals are like $7 on $8, or $10.
Oh yeah.
And you look at it's like, well, it's mainly because the drink is like maybe like $1 or $2, or then the fries, and then like it's like you get crappy fries. They're not even good fries. Fries are always cold. They're never warm. And then the burger is just mainly all bun. There's no meat. It's like, where's the burger? You look through it. It's all condiment crap. Your pickles and whatever you're down there. Your tomato, lettuce. Now, and I get touched this now because nowadays it's just COVID. They really skipped on the lettuce. You get like, there's like a little piece. Okay, cool. It's like a little square. It's like not even, the burger is like, bigger than that. It's like, it's at the point where, yeah, I think this is probably the most popular scene in the whole entire movie.
It is.
Because people
that
identify.
The briefcase. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is here, this movie is pretty much half over, but it kind of starts to slow down to me. We find out Duvall's wife is going through menopause. It's heavily implied because she was a beautiful woman and now she's not, and they lost their child, and that's why he's retiring to. It's not happy wife, happy life. It's I love her. She sacrificed for me, which is a nice ideal, but she's not likable either. It's like, is there anybody likable in this film? And
it's Michael Douglas. I know. And they really force you to like Michael Douglas. Everyone else is a crap character. Even the wife, I said, she's kind of even though she's not, realistically, compared to him, she's much nicer, much better person you want to be around versus him, where he's the person that just.
Well, let's do this.
Yeah.
There's several more scenes that we could discuss in here because this movie is very talkable. But I want to focus on probably the most controversial part of the movie, and at least at the time when it came out, and I wanted to bring it up. And then we can talk a little bit about the ending and just why people should or should not really watch this movie. And I think we both think it's a should. Michael Douglas is walking around, and of course now the cops are out looking for him, and he finds himself in an Army, Navy type surplus store where there is I'm trying to watch what I say because of the YouTube algorithm. There's a Caucasian American person of a higher power, allegedly, that's in charge, who does not like people of same-sex attractions to each other. Let's just say. Yeah,
Frederick Forrest is the actor. He's in charge of the surplus store, the Army surplus store.
Yes.
And he is a racist. We'll just come on and say it. He's a racist. And he heard about what Michael Douglas did before with the group of guys.
Mm-hmm.
And he does call them by a racial slur.
Yes.
He uses a hard. So I'll just say this: for those who do not like the hard N word, this probably would not be a word for you. I mean, not a movie for you, because you will get triggered by it.
Well, the scene,
yeah, the scene, but So if you can't, I might want to skip it, or maybe if you can find this movie on TV. I don't know if it's on TV anymore. A lot of times they edit that stuff out.
Yes, they do.
And Michael Douglas kind of like, I almost feel like Michael Douglas is kind of offended by him when he drops the N word.
Oh,
You
he
know,
is.
yeah,
Because he's
and
being uncivil.
uncivil, and like I was like it's like so. When you, like I said, at this point, they're really trying to make Michael Douglas' character more likable than anybody else in the film. They really want you to identify with him. So
Yeah.
it's saying he's a good guy, even though he's doing bad things.
Yeah, he manages to escape the clutches of this guy who was going to end up arresting him because he didn't want to be insulted by Michael Douglas's character defense. And this scene's extended because they're showing some props of a particular time period that we don't really need to bring up. It actually goes on too long. There's a lot of symbols in it too, and so a lot of people are like, "Hey, to have a movie that's like a dark comedy, you have all this stuff in here is not cool." So we're being very fuzzy intentionally here, especially if you haven't seen the movie. If you have seen, you know exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah,
Let's just say that the scene ends and it allows Michael Douglas to get away, but he has the rocket launcher, which he shoots off with a little kid, which why I don't. To me, that was the most kind of like,
but
why are we this? Why is this scene in here? I don't get it.
yeah,
It just ends up with Robert Duvall figuring out that he's going home to see his ex-wife and his kid because it's his kid's birthday, and they end up meeting on the pier out there. I don't know if it's Santa Monica or no, Venice is where they're at.
But there is one scene I want to talk about though before you get into the very final scene.
Oh, go ahead then.
The traffic scene, construction.
Well, that's here with the rock RPG. So yeah, what is it about you?
Oh no, he goes up to him and he basically this is where they take the main character, and this is like you tell this the director where they wanted to sell event people. It's basically like similar to the gas station scene, or not the gas station, but the convenience store scene with him spouting off different stuff and venting about this. Now so this is for everybody who hates construction, and he accuses them like, you guys, there's nothing wrong with the road. You guys are always fixing the road. You guys.
Oh yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, this is an exploitation thing to make us like them. Yep.
Yeah. They're really wanting to sell him. So that what he does, he fires a rocket launcher. They get out of the way, and he fires it into the manhole, and blows it up the bridge.
You're right. That's a good call.
Yeah, so I mean, I love the scene, because but it's like. He's like, I just it just points out is because that happens here in where I live. They're constantly.
And also too, let me tell you this or ask you this: who's showing them how to use the RPG? Do you remember? It's a kid of African American persuasion.
Yeah,
and it's like they have an instant kind of not friendship but kinship. He's like, you need to do this, you need to do that, and the other kids that are with them in that group. Are like with them, so that's a really good point. I hadn't.
Yeah, the kid, because the kid said he learned about how to do it by watching TV.
Yep. And the kid smiled like, "Hey, you did it. That was pretty cool." It's the two things that stuck out in one earlier scene was in the background was a gigantic African American ass hanging out, and that was Sir Mix-a-Lot because Baby Got Back was really huge.
Yeah.
Google it if you don't know what that is. And then also we saw
40 years old
MC Hammer thing because Hammer Time was all over here, and this kid had a high top fade. I was like, oh yeah, that's right. That was a really big cultural thing too. The Oakland A's were massive. But yeah, it just still feels like it's dragging here. Like I said, there's a few more scenes, but I just kind of want to talk about the ending.
The ending, Jake, for me though, the very ending.
I agree, and that's what I want to get to because this movie has, whether you think it's dark or a comedy or a nice blend or a confusing mess, I think it does drag here at the end. Because he has a death wish, literally.
Yeah,
and
you know how it's going to end, and he's not making any attempt to flee or run away. So you kind of, it's like, it's almost like a mercy killing at the end here. It's like you're putting a
coward.
No, let me finish. It's like they're basically like he's a dog that has rabies, so you got to put him down.
Yeah,
he's broken, so put him down. Broken, so they're trying to imply the only thing you can do with a guy like this is to put him down. They can't rehabilitate it. Tell you.
Robert Duvall shows up on the pier. The other cops are coming right behind him. Douglas has a gun, and his wife and child are there. And of course, the wife and child are rightly scared, and he's just, I miss you so much. It's the whole, oh my gosh, the whole American dream thing. So you could say that this movie really makes fun of what it means to have a stable household and how
Yeah.
important it can be, and how nobody cares about it, because nobody in this movie has a quote unquote healthy relationship. I'm not saying unhealthy, but
No.
it's
There's no.
some people said, oh no, this is not a racial film. This is a film that's like anti nuclear family, which is the term used in the 80s to describe a stable household with the father still producing, maybe the mom's starting to work, but having kids and everything too. As dated as that sounds, and maybe unrealistic to a lot of younger people.
It's showing that not every family is a happy family.
Yeah.
Showing that there are people like this out there. And the scary the tagline should have been like, "This could be your neighbor." That should have been the tagline in the beginning of the poster for the movie.
Well, we mentioned how
your everyday man, the one you least expect, this could happen to you.
And it's true, because one of the things we've talked about with the role of men in general in families over the decades, like 70s to 80s to 90s, is just how they've gotten softer. They're not really, there's less and less positive male role models out there, and what it means to be a stable functioning adult, let alone a male role model. And for Michael Douglas's character, he's supposed to represent it. This movie, in a way, you could argue, takes a shit on that, because you're not, as a guy, you're taught not to cry, not to have your feelings. You've got to learn how to deal with the world, because if you don't, you're not going to be any good to anybody, especially your family and your kids and anything else. And as lame as that may sound to some people, I think that's one thing that some people argued about with this movie, but it got overshadowed by just the absurd nature of some of these scenes. And here, to your point, Robert Duvall does the most feminine thing of all. He talks it out with Michael Douglas. He's got his thing of popcorn. He kind of shows when he's walking around the gun at his holster. So, he's Michael Douglas's wife sees it and all that, and the wife kicks the gun away. So you could argue that both these males are really ineffective, and they're arguing about what it's like. And even though Duvall's a strong performer, Michael Douglas knows, here defense, that it's the end of the road. He doesn't want to do the right thing or pay the price to recreate his life at his age. So he fakes like he has a gun. He's like, oh, I'm the bad guy? How can I be? And then, of course, he ends up getting shot, and boom, end of the movie. It's a very weak ending.
Well, you also find at the end that, Robert Duvall, after he finds the gun, it was only a water pistol.
Yep.
So Robert Duvall shot a guy with a water pistol.
And Robert Duvall's like, yeah, I don't care. I'm going to Lake Havasu with my fat, ugly wife that I don't like anymore, and I'm going to retire. I mean, because that's the vibe that we get watching it, even though he says some interesting things about, well, she's having a tough time dealing with, her beauty fading and all that.
He's the kind of guy.
That's a very, anti-female.
Yeah, his character comes to the guy who's he's a cop that's trying to quit smoking, so he's chewing gum, That he's very cliche.
Yeah, and that's true, because even then, smoking was not something that got put on a lot, and it really died down a lot in the 80s. It peaked in the 80s and started dying off, and you saw a lot of that. Oh, let's chew gum instead of showing people smoke. No, men smoke.
Yeah.
Or at least they did.
Until they found out that gives you cancer.
Everybody knew, but they wanted to smoke. It's just, this is not like Death Wish or any of those kinds of films that say, you know what, this is what we're trying to say, and we're just going to show you a movie that says it, rather than this, which has a lot of things to it. If it just was a comic kind of fantasy and was more of these skits things, it would work. But it just, it's tough to have anything positive to say about him other than how good his performance is. And Michael Douglas is fantastic. Duvall, it's a great movie to watch. It's very watchable.
Yep.
It's entertaining. I think if you do treat it as a comedy, it can be funny. Some people maybe get triggered by the way some things are represented. This was not above, what had already been done in film. So there was nothing shockingly new about it, whether it's the language or the types of characters that were presented. But this is a movie that triggered a lot of people and had a lot of discussion going on in the pop culture world at that time. But if you're a Michael Douglas fan, you've got to watch this movie. I think it's a film with some great scenes in it. You got to check it out. What's some of your final takes?
Final takes on this. Like I said, it's just a movie. Me and my buddy always quote, it's like, having a bad day. Like, we're not going to shoot him. We're not one of those people idiots going to go up and shoot up their workplace. But this is like, sometimes you just want to go a little bit of postal. You kind of want to blow up. You can just yell at people because we're trained by society. That's not normal to yell at people. Stick up for yourself. We're men have been weakened down. You're supposed to be compliant.
And most of all, as a male,
Yeah.
It's the 666 rule, the
Yeah.
devil rule. You gotta be 6 foot tall, make 6 figures, and have 6 inches of pipe that you can lay down, and then you're good to go. Because if not, you're what this movie would suggest to you as being not economically viable.
I don't know what plumbing has to do with any of this, though.
Well, if you know, you know.
But every time I watch this, makes me want to go get a burger.
Michael Douglas was super hot at the time, though. Basic Instinct, a bunch of other stuff. This guy was hitting on all cylinders.
Came out the Jewel of the Nile in the 80s, late 80s.
Streets of San Francisco in the 70s. This guy's been around a while, but it's a good watch. It's a film. It's not crap. It's definitely good, and it'll make you think about how some things are. And I always wondered if I was, say, 20 years old and watching it now, what would I think about it? Would I go, oh, is that what it was like in the 90s? How realistic is it? Oh, my God, is it really that different today?
It's one of those movies.
Better, worse? It makes you think about it a little bit.
This is also one of those movies I could turn my brain off and just watch it and just cheer. but then the adult project is like, wait, oh, that's why I have a gun, because there are people like this.
True. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Falling Down, Michael Douglas, 1993. Check it out. For RDV, everybody involved here at the Xtreme Movie Show, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Have a good night, and as always, stay extreme.
Have a good